We are going to find out how Brett makes a humongous difference in the lives of his clients by eliminating deferring capital gains. Brett has been a monster in this business for many years, and it is a great pleasure to finally have him on the Due Diligence Project podcast. Welcome, Brett. How are you doing today?
Alex, I'm doing so well. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. And this is the Monday after Super Bowl. So we're going to make this kind of a Super Bowl edition. I know your team is the 49ers. They almost made it there. Let's talk about the Super Bowl. What'd you think of the game?
Oh, I thought it was an amazing game. What a battle. I thought the Chiefs were out of it in the first half, especially when Mahomes went down with that ankle potential injury. And then he came out like a Hall of Famer. And then the second half, and so did the rest of the team. So it was inspiring to watch. My heart was already broken from 2 weeks prior from the Niners not be able to make the Super Bowl, but well fought by Philadelphia too. Jalen Hurts was incredible as well. I mean, these were juggernauts, so it was fun to watch.
Football is like a microcosm of life. It's just like life, but everything happens more intensely, quicker and right there in front of you. Tremendous competition last night. I knew it was going to be a tough battle. You and I battle on a weekly basis. We're battling all sorts of challenges out there. But for those of you, for our audience that's not aware of what you do, tell us a little about yourself, and let's just start with your specialty. What is
Yeah,
it?
I grew up in the real estate industry and the business, if you will, with my parents, helping them build houses in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, East Bay Area, kind of Fremont, Mission, San Jose area, and fell in love with real estate at a very young age, and also quickly learned how to work hard and how to see a project from start to finish. As the years went on and as real estate values increased, we found out and learned about capital gains tax in particular. That can be a real challenge for a lot of our clients. I had a chance to study and practice multifamily brokerage at a place called Marcus and Millichap, and I loved it. I loved every bit of commercial real estate and investing and underwriting and negotiating and really figuring out ways to solve problems and help people build wealth and freedom. And this was in 2006 when I kind of launched that career. But it wasn't until 2008 that we kind of learned, how serious we all were about being in that business. And things quickly changed for myself and a lot of my clients that were making a lot of money and had a lot of wealth, quickly losing either half or everything because they didn't have enough diversification, enough liquidity. And essentially, a lot of them felt trapped by that 1031 exchange. They had overpaid and kind of the music stopped over the last few years and exchanged up, and it took on that equal or greater value, equal or greater debt. And if you start looking at that, you go, wow, could there have been a better way? And that's essentially what we went through. And so during this period of time as well, my wife and I were going through our own financial challenge, and we were just barely married and a baby on the way. And we had, 100% commission place at Marcus and Millichap, no salary, no benefits. And so we wanted to keep her home full time with our daughter. And so it was a couple of decisions. Number one, we had to put, if she was okay with it, we could move in with my brother into a small condo. And number two, I would start working a side hustle. And that side hustle became Cheesecake Factory. And so for nights and weekends, I'd serve, I'd be a server at Cheesecake Factory. And then by day, I'd cold call banks and talk with my clients and try to help them restructure their deals. And so it was, 60, 70-hour weeks, burning the candle at both ends. But I had a passion and a dream. My wife believed in me enough to say, hey, if you're learning and growing and it's going to lead to our long-term future of our family having some freedom financially, then keep going and we'll sacrifice. And so that began a 2-year kind of desert, if you will, financially, but it was really rewarding growth-wise. Some of the best growth, some of the best amount of perseverance and grit that was built up between us as a married couple, and it kind of really solidified our foundation for our marriage and where we were going. And it's during that time that we learned about this thing called a Deferred Sales Trust, which we're going to be talking about here in a minute, that really changed everything for myself, my business, but also for my clients to unlock some of that freedom. And so now we have 5 kids. We split time between California and Florida. And I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and we just love helping people solve challenges, in particular using the Deferred Sales Trust, but there's also other things like 1031 exchanges or Delaware Statutory Trust, different things. And so we love doing that, and we coach and train people on how to do that every day. And we have 5 kids, married 13 years, and And it's our passion to help people with exiting highly appreciated assets.
Very, very cool. Wow, what an amazing story. So you mentioned a couple things here interesting, and one of the things we want you to clear up for our community is the difference between deferred sales trust and a Delaware sales trust, because they're both DSTs, right? And a lot of financial professionals, or a lot of people who are not financial professionals, sometimes get those confused because they both have to do with real estate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to say Delaware 1031 is just to keep it in the 1031 family. Essentially, you want to start with what tax code are we starting with, right? So there's
Yeah.
there's IRC 401k, there's IRC 1031, there's also IRC 453. So the Delaware Statutory Trust is part of the IRC 1031 exchange tax code, where a seller of investment real estate can trade or move their interest into essentially typically one, two, three, sometimes it could be more portfolio, but typically one, two, or three properties that someone else has all the control. You lose all of the liquidity, you lose all of the
Mhm.
diversification, but the debt's not in your name, which is really positive typically. And typically these are some really big, great operators across the country that can help you defer all that capital gains tax, defer that depreciation recapture, as well be able to take on a lot of that debt that's out of your name now in their name, and it qualifies for a 1031 exchange. And so it can be an excellent way to build wealth, maintain what's called that stepped up basis, right? And to essentially, I call it retire from the day-to-day toilets, trash liability and having to do it yourself, but you're still really loving and investing into investment real estate. And so, yeah, we've helped clients do Delaware Statutory Trust. It's a great way to build some wealth. On the flip side, you can do what's called the Deferred Sales Trust. And this is a part of IRC 453, which is the separate tax code from 1031. So they're completely separate, but they're both known as DSTs, which is why they get confused quite a bit. But the Deferred Sales Trust is an installment sale with you on the sale of a highly appreciated business, crypto, stock, primary home, or investment real estate. Remember, the 1031 only works for investment real estate. You also have to do what's called a 45-day identification period, a 180-day close. And this can lead to overpaying, over concentrating, and not having enough liquidity or even the cash flow that you really want. Whereas the deferred sales trust unlocks some really cool freedoms in that instead of taking all the cash at closing, or instead of having to go into another piece of real estate right away, you take what's called a promissory note. Well, think of
Mhm.
it like this, Alex. If you owned a $10 million apartment complex in San Diego and you owned it free and clear for the last 30 years and you're fully depreciated, in California, it's about 40%, if not more, with state, federal, Obamacare, and depreciation recapture. So let's say you would have paid $4 million of tax, and Joe down the street wants to show up and buy it from you. He could put $1 million down payment, and you could carry back 9 million. You could do a seller carryback, and in that scenario, you've carried paper for that buyer. Therefore, you're in a tax deferral state for that 9 million. Now, the 1 million you'll pay tax on. You paid 400,000. Now, the rest of it you'll pay tax slowly over time. So this isn't a new concept. People know about seller carrybacks. They go all the way back to like the 1920s and 30s. It's a very tried and true tax law. Here's the key. With the trust, we give you all of the foundational aspects of the IRC 453 installment sale, but we give you a lot of the flexibilities that a traditional installment sale won't provide you. And so upon close of escrow, instead of financing, let's say Joe the buyer, Alex, essentially we're going to ask Joe the buyer to show up with $10 million, gets it with the bank, whatever. But the trust is going to jump in right in between the ultimate seller, which is you, and the ultimate buyer, which is Joe. And it's going to buy the asset for you for 10 million, and it's going to turn around and sell it for 10 million to Joe. Therefore, it has no gain because it bought and sold for the same price. And you're going to receive what's called a promissory note. And that
Okay.
promissory note is typically structured at about 8%, 6, 7, 8%. Compounding rate of return net of fees is the goal. But here's the key. You own a promissory note and you're in a deferral state, at which point you can start to invest with the funds with yourself into another real estate project. In fact, we just did a deal in Alabama. A gentleman sold a $2.6 million business, and the client wanted to buy and build multifamily units in Tennessee. And so he used a portion of the funds to build and buy those, not using a 1031. And so it's a neat way to dollar cost average into stocks, bonds, mutual funds, hard money lending, real estate development projects, or just sit on the sidelines and be patient and wait for a deal to show up. Whatever it might be, as an entrepreneur or as a passive retirement type of strategy, the deferred sales trust is an amazing fit.
So the ideal client, it sounds like the ideal client is looking at a 1031 alternative. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, it's anyone who has $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain on any asset of any kind. Because remember, a 1031 only works for investment real estate. It doesn't work for a primary home. We just did an $8 million deal in Palo Alto for a primary home seller who wanted to relocate to Nevada. And so they were trying to unlock that freedom. The way we put it is, having a tax flow mindset versus just a cash flow mindset. Most of
Mhm.
us are taught to just about cash flow, right? But more and more, it's important about tax flow because of the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet that's happening right now. So our ideal client is typically a baby boomer who's owned and built wealth for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, right? 5, 10, 20, $50 million net worth or more. And they're looking at unlocking some freedoms that the traditional blockbuster methods of tax deferral aren't providing. I mean, the 1031 exchange, I can tell you story after story of painful purchases from people who knew they weren't buying the real estate they really wanted to buy at the
Mhm.
time they wanted to buy it, the seller not giving them the terms or making a great deal. And yet they felt trapped by that capital gains tax. And so when you unlock those barriers to buying and investing in deals that make sense for you, essentially you can create a wealth building machine, which is really step two. Once you have a mindset that it's tax flow, not just cash flow, you move into building a team and you move into looking at the strategy that's going to solve your problems that you really have. And so the biggest thing for people listening to this is the ideal client is someone who's clarified their B, where they want to go,
Mhm.
but also understands their A, where they're at. What's the challenge, right? Now, the B, where they want to go. And when they clarify that, it could be estate tax, it could be location freedom, it could be capital gains tax deferral, it could be resetting a new depreciation schedule. It could be, I want to separate a partnership. We just did about a $13 million deal in San Diego, actually, not too far where you're at. And that particular sale, it was four partners, and they had built this car wash on an old, how San Diego has like the best Mexican food, right? California burritos. Well, this gentleman
Mhm.
had like a 15-year, a taco, burrito restaurant, but it was on a lot, and this lot was essentially a big lot that they said, you know what, we'll put the Mexican restaurant inside of the car wash, and we'll build a $4 million facility, and that $4 million facility moved to $13 million worth of assets over 2 years of building that business and that real estate. And so for them, they're in the business of what? Not buying $13 million or $20 million pieces of real estate. They're in the business of buying 500 to $1 million piece of land, increasing the value by 2 to 3 million of development, and then selling it for 13, not overpaying for another property 45 days later. They want to be diversified and liquid. And so they did exactly that. And in fact, one of the partners just retired. The other three did the deferred sales trust. And so what's unique about this versus the 1031 is typically the whole entity must move, meaning that in the 1031, all of the parties must go to the next
Mhm.
property. But in their scenario, they're entrepreneurs, they're developers. They're not buying $13 million pieces of land or real estate. They want to buy land that's discounted. So now they can dollar cost average, be very strategic about what they buy. And in the meantime, they can also be patient with the market timing. And guess what? The market has really shifted. Guess where land and development has gone? It's gone down, right? Now, development costs maybe have leveled up a little bit, but their land values have gone down. And so this is a perfect vehicle for them. They sold at the peak, they
Mhm.
diversify their wealth, they paid off some of their debt, and now they're in a position to strike when the iron's hot, if that makes sense.
Great. Wow. It's a great solution. So it sounds like, the deferred sales trust, this is a great solution for someone who's looking to diversify, someone who's not just looking to buy a bunch more real estate at the same level that they're just sold at. What are some of the challenges? Besides the challenge, what are some of the fears that your clients are facing? Because it sounds like a great idea. Why doesn't everyone do this?
Yeah, the biggest thing is education and their trusted advisors, right? As you know, with anything, once we build wealth, people help us to build that wealth, and we build a trusted relationship with them. Our CPAs, tax attorneys, our real estate brokers. I started at Marcus and Millichap, and there was about 30 of us in the room listening to the Deferred Sales Trust presentation in 2009, thinking, "Wow, this sounds too good to be true." It seems like we would have heard about it. I mean, we thought we were the Navy SEALs of investment real estate, the best in the country, doing 1031 exchanges all the time. And yet we were learning something new in 2009. Now, what's interesting is only a couple of us out of the whole 30 in that room took action to start to actually learn and start to apply. Because it's one thing to listen to a podcast, go to a conference, take a class, get a degree. But if you're not going to apply the knowledge or the potential of it and really practice what it is, the essence of it, and how it actually can unlock the freedoms, then you're right. Most people, they get stuck in either procrastination or sometimes fear if they don't have enough time. So if you think about it, we just did a deal. We closed a $17 million deal in Sacramento. It was a billboard company slash real estate sale. It's a little bit about business and real estate sale. He had never heard of it, and he was in escrow. He had about 60 days to close. Now, he had a trusted financial advisor who actually introduced him to the Deferred Sales Trust. So there was that bridge of know, like, and trust that had built up. Number two, he had his CPAs that were local that looked at this and reviewed it. He had the M&A attorney actually look at it. But what you realize is that if people haven't heard about it yet, the first thing they want to do is go to someone they can trust to see if they've heard about it. And the challenge becomes, well, is this person likely to say yes? Well, probably not, because if they say yes to something they've never done, they never had a client do, and they didn't introduce to you, then the likelihood of it actually, if it goes well, then I guess they can win. But if it goes south, now all of a sudden they feel like they're responsible. And so this is part of where the Deferred Sales Trust tax returns we work with provide lifetime audit defense and have over a 27-year track record and thousands of closes and billions of sales under management over the years. And literally over 20 no change IRS audits. It's actually one of the biggest deals was in Southern California, $125 million deal. And, they have national law firms and CPA firms that have tens of thousands of tax returns. And literally it's batting 1,000 and it's perfect. But people haven't heard of it, partly because their people haven't told them about it. They haven't listened to your podcast yet. And then the second part would be, sometimes you can tell people all of the evidence, but emotionally we found that it's a story that helps them to change their belief. And so we actually try to encourage people to talk to our clients, talk to the banks. But actually, there's a story that really captured this well, Alex, and I'll just share it right now. And this is one of the stories that helps me to give even more confidence and conviction in the legality and the track record of the Deferred Sales Trust. And the person I'll bring into the story is a gentleman named David Young. In fact, he's out of the Los Angeles area now. He worked with a gentleman named Bill Gross. And for people who are in real estate, we may not know who those people are. But they are some of the best in the world at what they do. Bill Gross and David Young and about 5 others built a company called PIMCO about 20 years ago. And PIMCO is one of the largest kind of wealth financial bond and investments in the world. I mean, they're huge, okay? And they helped bring it from 80 billion to 1.2 trillion. They exploded it and they all did a great job and they got a big payday. They all kind of retired. And as you can imagine, these guys get approached with a lot of people telling them that they've got this tax deferral thing, or they've got this, strategy that they should introduce to their clients and they should become a part of. And the way that David puts it is, most of these things just aren't worth the trouble. They don't pass the smell test. There are all these things that are either offshore or haven't faced the IRS or haven't been around long enough, and they're too complicated and too many moving things. And so, but he goes, Brett, him and about 4 other guys, about 5 years ago, they started their due diligence process, and they did a 2-year due diligence, and they had their legal team, and they did their team, and they reviewed it. They talked to clients and banks and the investments and the strategy, and they really looked at it in detail for 2 years. And if you can imagine, if you're best in the world, you might have some people to call on to figure out something is real and It works. And after that 2-year due diligence, they came back with 2 conclusions. Number one, the person who created he's one of my business partners, maybe the smartest person we've ever met. He's the tax attorney. Number two, he's also a CPA, by the way. Number two, we're all in. We'll become a part of the inner circle, and we'll help to be for the financial advising aspect, manage capital for investors that choose to use us. And so the question for everyone listening, and for you and me and Alex, is if it's good enough for David Young after 2 years of due diligence, is it good enough for your CPA, your tax attorney, your financial advisor, your whoever who's saying no? And every single deal we do, this always comes up. And most of the time when we actually introduce people to David, watch the videos, look at the evidence, they're like, wow, if he can say yes, then it is probably that good. And I'm gonna go ahead and take a leap of maybe faith for them because it's new, but they end up having all the transformation that it unlocks.
You're now kind of walking into my little world of the due diligence project and really facilitating due diligence for hundreds and hundreds of elite CPA firms and law firms. And you just shared with me some of the challenges, some of the success stories, obstacles that you have with due diligence. You had a group do 2 years of due diligence. How many CPAs you think and attorneys look at a concept and would invest 2 years of doing due diligence in something?
Well, part of the
I don't
problem is
think
the client. Yeah, you're right. Very low. But part of the
very
problem
low.
is the client's not willing to pay them, and or they're not given
Right.
enough time, or they're trying to squeeze them to make a decision within 30 days of a close. And so really the responsibility goes back to you, the seller of the asset, and the preparation and the what you're willing to pay. All right. And also realize too that you may not be asking that person to give you their thumbs up. That's the other thing. You got a certain point, you've got to transfer your trust from your team to our team and realize that if your team had already figured it out, they would have already have told you and you wouldn't be calling us. Right.
Absolutely.
And
This
so,
is look, yeah, this is the world I live in. I mean, your world and my world are now, we're talking about the intersection because all we do is we work with hundreds of elite CPA firms, law firms, and we facilitate due diligence for them for all sorts of sophisticated tax structures, including deferred sales trust. So what we're finding is that most CPA firms, law firms, they don't know how many pages there are in the tax code. In fact, no one knows how many pages there are in the tax code unless you do, or unless you know a CPA firm and law firm that does. I don't know anyone who does. The tax code's constantly changing. CPA firms are spread so thin, they're just lucky enough to be able to produce a tax return. But then to be able to do due diligence on all the possible strategies in a tax code that's constantly changing, that no one has any idea how many pages there are anyway, we're talking about a very, very difficult thing. So the fact is that some CPAs are willing to do 2 years of due diligence, something, but most CPAs are not. And what we've done to solve this is we've just brought a lot of these hundreds and hundreds of CPAs into the due diligence project community where they're all introducing their favorite resources and vetting out each resource independently and then sharing those notes, sharing all the notes on all the strategies and rating all these strategies. This is how we solve it. So we're dealing with the same challenges that you're dealing with. Of course, a brand new CPA never seeing a concept, it's going to take them some time. Hopefully it doesn't take them 2 years to complete. But the bottom line is what's really, really interesting is we're both seeing the same thing, is that CPAs want to do great things for their clients. They have, their challenge is time. Their challenge is finding the best in class people to actually ask their questions to. Hopefully those are independent people. They want to be part of a community where there's other like-minded CPAs they can go and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Have you seen this thing before? What's going to happen in audit? What's going to happen in tax court? What we found is there are certain CPAs that they just want to talk to maybe 4, 5, 6 different CPAs, or they want to talk to the thought leader in the space, or they're not going to trust the salesperson there. They need to talk to someone else besides the salesperson. Hopefully we need an expert besides the salesperson who's the expert. So this is the challenge that you're facing, that we're facing, that all these providers are facing. And more importantly, the CPAs are facing this challenge, because if they can't figure out the due diligence, then they're left with whatever strategies they're comfortable with to bring to their clients, and then their clients have to deal with the ramifications of whatever that CPA has already completed due diligence on. So you and I are dealing with the same thing. We're dealing with due diligence. We're overcoming due diligence, and once we overcome it, we bring this incredible value to our clients. So
yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. And that's also part of why we provide no cost due diligence, right? So on our side, tax attorney, myself, the financial advisors, our client references, it's all no cost, no obligation. It's 100% no cost, no obligation. And we actually form the trust. We will weave it in, working with your M&A advisors, your CP, your tax attorneys. Now there's some NDAs that do need to be signed. We do require that to make sure that it doesn't get, abused or people take advantage of it and steal it. And so we do have that in place. And that's another part of the challenge sometimes as well, is getting the advanced tax attorneys or CPAs to sign that. Although we have national law firms that have done this. We have former IRS agents that are tax attorneys that did a 6 month due diligence and have wrote, legal opinion letters. There's also a private letter ruling. And really the big audits, it's been formal audits, not just individual audits, but also formal audits, what's called promoter audits, to your point about the sales thing, right? But looking at making sure that people are, actually doing what they say they're doing, and it's actually going through. And all those have been no change, no findings, which is pretty remarkable, right? If you think about it, Alex, if you or I were to get a audit on our tax return, what are the odds that they don't find, one missing receipt or one thing that was off? They're probably gonna find something, right? And we might owe a little tax. Well, in these promoter audits, one of the biggest ones was over $100 million deal in Southern California. No change, no findings. Perfect, right? And so it's still batting 1,000. We keep closing deals, and we keep helping people, And then there's a lifetime audit defense in case there is an audit. But the key is, do you have enough time? Do you have an opportunity to introduce your CPAs and tax attorneys and such? Of course, talk with clients and then make a decision, right? Make a decision, because if you choose not to and just pay your tax, well, that's 25 to 50%. Or if you choose maybe the 1031 exchange and just defer it, and you get a chance to maybe lose because you overpaid, and especially with higher interest rates, what's going on right now. There's just a lot of things there, but this is part of why we're here, to try to educate people.
Awesome. Well, look, tell us something, tell us something about yourself that your clients don't even know about you.
Yeah.
As we kind of ask you our final questions
Sure.
and kind of wrap this up, because this has been awesome so far, Brett.
I guess what a fun fact. I grew up playing basketball and football and baseball, but really focused on basketball and football in high school. And then I was able to get a basketball scholarship to a small private school in Northern California. Played a little bit in Southern California too, at Point Loma that you were connected with, Alex.
Yeah.
I walked on there, and then I was able to get a scholarship to another NAIA school up north called William Jessup University. So I could dunk a basketball at 6 foot white guy. I love hoops, and I used to be able to, right? Not anymore. And
that's very impressive. It's impressive, taking
yeah.
all that competitive nature from playing college basketball and bringing it to the business world. Very unique, and I certainly appreciate, and I bet your clients certainly appreciate that competitive nature as you fight for them for the best possible result for them. We're dealing with a lot of change in the financial service world. We're both involved in it. How do you see, what do you see taking place right now, and what do you see the financial services world looking like over the next 5 years with all the changes?
Yeah, good question. So I think for me, my background is commercial real estate, investment real estate, brokerage, multifamily. To me, I'm the most comfortable in things that I can touch, I can feel, I can add value to. I can depreciate. I can essentially grow wealth, especially in pro-business states that are growing. Jobs are growing. People need a place to live. The housing crisis is a major thing, and it's still really still just a crisis. It's not going away, going anywhere. So if you can buy and build multifamily properties in areas that are developing, that's a part of the financial industry that I feel comfortable with, right? As long as debt's not overextended, as long as you're buying typically existing properties that are valued. That doesn't mean you can't build. You just got to be careful what the costs can be and the timelines there. So speaking of investment real estate, I like that a lot. Now, the other side is that we bring in experts that are financial advisors, right? And this is part of what we help to build with the DST Dream Team. You get people that have different expertise can help you with that. So we'll bring in those. And of course, there's inflation concerns, but it seems to be tempering. Interest rates, from what I've heard, there's opportunities for it to go down in the next year. But I think right now, diversification, liquidity, and being out of debt is very wise. I think buying real estate with a new depreciation is really wise. I think, eliminating estate tax upon your exits is very wise as well. We can eliminate estate tax in one sale in one day, and not have to give it all away to charity, and not have to gift it all away, and not have to buy a bunch of life insurance, right? Using what's called the DST 2.0 or DST Plus. And so it's really understanding that the marketplace is always going to change, and perhaps we are in a recession, it's going down. But if you can diversify, you can dollar cost average, you can buy in and out of real estate, and you can get the one thing back, which is time, which is typically the hardest thing to do when exiting. And that's why we're such a proponent of the Deferred Sales Trust and what it can do for you. And so those things don't, concern us as much as executing on the business plan to stay diversified and to buy when deals make sense.
Well, awesome. Final question. We have a diverse audience, and one of the things I like to ask is, one secret to your success. We have a lot of people listening. Some might be young, some might be very successful, old, but we can always learn from successful people like you. You've created something amazing out of nothing. Just off the top of your head, I'm sure you have a lot of formulas, a lot of ideas, but one idea that you want to share with our audience is a secret to your success.
Yeah, I'd say the one idea is just to learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Right. Growing up, we were taught to get the degree, to get the scholarship, to close the deal. Right. These are external things that we really work hard on. But instead of working harder on ourselves, our health, our finances, our fitness, our faith, personal development or leadership, those types of things, which build the internal, and the internal is what lasts eternal, right? For forever, right? Whereas the external is just temporary, right? So if you're working harder on yourself, the internal stuff, the rest of it tends to work out. And it's a quote by Jim Rohn, and he says, "You work harder on yourself, you'll make a fortune versus just working hard on your job, you'll make a living," right? And so that perspective and really doing the work to have great mentors and coaches, to those who are going to push you on those other areas of your life that maybe sometimes, especially when I was younger, we didn't think about as much, right? It was just, how do I make the team? How do I get the scholarship? How do I close that deal, right? Those types of things that were external. So work harder on yourself than you do on your job. If you work hard on your job, you'll make a living, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you work hard on yourself, you'll make a fortune. But really, that fortune is in that character that it forges inside of you to be able to give back to those in your family and your community, and leave that legacy of character and of giving, right? And so but that takes that hard internal work, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm fired up. You got me inspired. It's a great way to start the week. Brett, thank you so much for joining us. The Due Diligence Project podcast today was a great session with you, and God bless you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Alex. My pleasure.